got all my shit set up finally. Thanks for doing this, man. This is the first episode of my new show. I'm pretty stoked about it.
Tell me about the show.
What's that?
Tell me about the show.
Yeah, so I had a bunch of other podcasts that I was doing. I was doing one with my boy for a little while, and then I had been doing a bunch for other people. Like, they were paying me to produce shows for them, and I kind of just, I didn't really get like sick of it, but I kept feeling like I was making all this stuff for other people and I couldn't do anything, on my own. So I was like, all right, well, I like interviewing people, so I want to start a show where I interview people, like learn more and that sort of a thing. So that's where you come into play.
I think and it's cool today because you don't have to remember back in the day, if you wanted some sort of platform or be able to connect with people on a larger level, mm-hmm. and really have people engage with your shit, you had to do a lot. You had to have some sort of physical outreach strategy. You had to have flyers and all types of stuff. And now you can just literally open up your Zoom and just stream. It's ridiculous. But a lot of people are making money. A lot of people are getting their thoughts out. It's been good, man. I've been watching a lot of Mike Tyson's new podcast. You should check it out. It's pretty good.
Yeah, I've listened to some of his podcasts. His voice just gets me, man. Sometimes I can't listen to him for more than an hour. I'm just I can't do this.
If you listen close enough to what he's saying though, the dude is just incredibly intelligent, man. He's just had a ton of experiences and been in Hollywood for so long that he's just a wealth of information.
Yeah, his story's nuts too. I listened to him on Rogan's podcast where he kind of got in deep with him about his background and everything like that. I had no idea that he had this troubled past and then pretty much got recruited to box, and that's all he's ever done.
Yeah, he's an animal.
Yeah, and he's about to fight again too, which is ridiculous. I can't wait till that happens because I'm definitely trying to watch that.
It's just two old dudes who used to knock people out respectively. I don't know. I'm not going to be buying it. I will be watching the highlights.
I don't know. I don't think I probably won't buy it either, but I'll try to find, one of my friends or somebody or something who has it.
Yeah.
So, it's been what? Probably high school since the last time I talked to you. I've been seeing some of your stuff on LinkedIn and, kind of following, I wouldn't say close, but, I'm sort of kind of in the know to what it is you're doing now. You want to just give me a rundown and we'll just see where the conversation goes from there?
So I guess a brief rundown. So when I was going, so before college even, I was all into basketball, as mm-hmm. going to camps and in AAU. My dad used to play semi-pro, so he had a ton of connections nationally. And I was playing for this AAU team in Jersey called the Gym Rats. And it's funny because I wasn't the greatest of high school basketball players. I think I was averaging maybe 8 to 10 points a game in my senior year. Nothing too crazy, but I had a huge outreach, strategy in the country in terms of just getting to the right camps and tournaments. And I actually got recruited to play at American University. It was between me and 3 other point guards,
right?
Basically battling it out at this camp over the weekend to take the scholarship. I ended up not being able to get the scholarship. They gave it to somebody else, but I was like, shit, what's next? So I ended up going to Rowan. My grandma worked there. My brother had went there. My sister had went there. It was familiar. It was in South Jersey. So I was like, you know what? I went to Rowan. And when I went to Rowan, I'm like, damn, I didn't even know. You just don't know. When you're in college, you really don't always know what you want to do. It's a percentage.
Yeah, almost. I had no idea when I went to school what I wanted to do.
Yeah, a large majority of people that go to college, they don't know what the hell they want to do. So I was no different. But I came in and I was like, I have some sort of understanding about politics. I like watching the news.
Right.
All right, let me write my major down as political science.
Right.
That changed my life, obviously. I started interning at Senator Cory Booker's office in Camden, just really taking calls and troubleshooting issues for constituents calling in.
Right.
I did that for a few months. And as I did that, I started realizing there's just so many different angles and departments within the political space. You have the public sector, you've got elected officials' offices, right. You've got these agencies working for the state, federal, and local governments. You got the lobbyists, you got the advocacy. It's just huge, it's a huge apparatus. And I realized through having that experience, though it wasn't, a long experience, I found out that I really wanted to be in the private sector. So I started really positioning myself to understand that side of the game. I started interning under who I believe is one of the best lobbyists in the country. His name is John Hawkins at this lobbying firm called Wojak and Associates. At the time, it's now Wojak Government Relations. And I learned everything, dude. Like just how the sausage was made, like from start to finish. Like we were working with.
Now was this like was it like federal lobbying or state and local lobbying? Is there like any sort of distinction or anything like that?
Yeah. So this particular firm, so they were actually the first firm in Pennsylvania, like period. Like they were the first modern lobbying firm in Pennsylvania.
Got it.
A dude named Steve Wojak, who actually died about a year before I got there. He was one of probably the first lobbyists in the city of Philadelphia and in the state. And he's actually like responsible for like the Lincoln Financial Field being built and cutting deals to get the casinos here. He was just a major player. The dude by the name of Steve Crawford actually took over for him as a CEO of that firm. And he was actually Governor Rendell's old chief of staff. So we were just plugged. I was like 23 years old, 22 years old at the time, just learning the game, man. We had clients from this Philadelphia 76ers to like the Real Estate Development Association of the city. We represented all the general contractors of the city, literally everything state and local. And that's where I really was able to like cut my teeth in Philadelphia City Council and like start to build relationships with like all the council folks, all the state reps, all the state senators. But ultimately, like all things, like you want to make more money.
Yep.
I left there. I went to this firm called Bellevue Strategies, run by a dude named Mustafa Rashid, who's a good dude. He owns one of two black-owned lobbying firms in the state. But I mean, they had an incredible, client list. Like one of my clients was like Rock Nation on some of their Meek stuff. I had the Philadelphia International Airport. I had the PPA, who everybody hates.
That's the parking authority, right? Yeah,
I had all types of clients, man. And one of my favorite clients while I'm there, as an aside, was this firm called Shift Capital, who's actually funded by Goldman Sachs, and they did social impact real estate. So all of their real estate opportunities and the investment that they were having throughout the city was all, really to just build the community up, put people in the proper place and be able to like really invest into the community in a tangible way. So that was like one of my biggest clients, and I like really was trying to like put myself in that lane a little bit, because I think a lot of times like we don't see like all the federal dollars and state dollars like on a local level. Like you're not actually able to touch it. You don't really see what it does, but
right.
that firm was doing that. So and then from there, I because one of my clients was Rock Nation, I actually was kind of like got seeped into that world, into the entertainment world. And I actually got brought on to run government relations for Reform Alliance, as you know. Run by Van Jones, and who have prominent board members, and Jay-Z and Meek Mill and Michael Rubin and Robert Kraft. Incredible experience. I was running 7 different states. I was in Pennsylvania, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Iowa, a few other states, just really trying to build out a strategy and execute a strategy to get probation and parole reform for folks, because we had found out through just studies run by Pew and other groups that like folks were getting technical violations for just stupid shit, smoking weed or showing up late to an appointment and going back to jail, or getting more time on their probation. It was just dumb. So
that Meek documentary that they had on Amazon Prime, like I was watching that with one of my friends, and I was just blown away by what kept happening.
Well, I mean, and it's like for him, I think it was a good example for people to just understand how nuanced and complex the system is, because he's a millionaire rapper, who has incredible contacts, who has access to funds, et cetera,
right.
Can still be subjected to the same system that millions right now throughout the country are dealing with. So I think the cause was good, and I think more people need to be aware of what's going on. So for me, that was like really, for me, it was a claim to fame, because I think a lot of times, like when I was at the other lobbying firms, we weren't always working on shit that actually impacted people's lives.
Right.
We weren't always, focused on the little man and the little woman or the family. Like, a lot of the stuff was just, quite frankly, just advocating for, corporate interests. And, though sometimes that could be good and most times that could be bad, it really was good for me to cut my teeth and understand, like I said, how the sausage is made, and how, how things get done, how to, have relationships with elected officials, how to have relationships with their staff, how to get legislation, brought forth into the conversation, how to build coalitions. I mean, it's a lot of skills I learned at those lobbying firms I was able to implement at Reform. So, I think it was successful in terms of the experience for me. I've since left. I started my own firm last October, Darby Public Strategies. I was honestly scared shitless, to be honest with you, Brian, because
of course
they don't tell you this, man. So in politics, like, there's a lot of like factions, right? So you have like different families and different like subgroups who like all interact and all kind of make plays together and build strategy together, for better or for worse.
Right.
I've never really belonged to anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, because you came in on your own, right?
I've always kind of had, much to the chagrin of some of my mentors, I've always kind of done shit on my own.
Right.
Like I've always had a tunnel vision of like being an individual and like taking what I've learned and like doing my own thing with it. So it was like, it was natural for me to want to do my own thing. But I was scared, man, just because like when you don't have the backing of like a major firm or a major company, or even any company or any firm, like your name is all you have. So I was, I knew I had built like sort of a presence, obviously, on social media. I had built a reputation for myself. But I just didn't know how folks were going to react. I didn't know how, whether folks were going to respect the fact that I had my own firm, whether I was going to get blackballed, right? Because that happens from time to time. And people who know me have the ability to blackball me at any point, quite frankly. So I didn't know if that was going to happen. I didn't know, most importantly, whether I was going to be able to get clients or not.
Right. Yeah, that's funny, a huge jump too. Like when you're talking about, I'm sure you're in a job, right? Like you had a financially stable position at the time, and then you're just trying to jump from, an income to nothing.
Yeah, I mean, and like the craziest part about it is like when I first started, I had one client, and it was good and it worked for me. But like the back of my mind, I'm like, shit, I just started my own firm. I only have one client. I'm like 2.5 months in. I'm over here on LinkedIn. I'm, traveling to DC. I'm traveling to New York. I'm, putting the word out to my folks here in Philly and throughout the state of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, trying to let folks know, hey, I just started my own firm. Like I need clients. So it was really, really, nerve wracking for me. And my son was actually born last September. So as I was like learning how to be a new dad, I was learning how to be a CEO of a company at the same time. So it was just like the perfect storm, if you will. But it's since worked out, man. I have a nice book of clients now. I'll be a year in next month. It's been really well for me. I'm blessed. I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'm really, now more than ever, really appreciative of the mentors that I've had and the people that I've worked for, because without them, I wouldn't know what the hell I'd be doing. And, I think the most important part is like, for me, as I've been building this vision of ultimately running my own firm and running it for years and really being able to branch out from there, is ultimately doing good work, right? Because like starting your own business is cool and shit. And like, doing your own thing is cool and making your own money. But if you're not impacting people's lives, then what are you doing it for? So I've really taken that approach, and like with every single project that I have, like I make sure that there's a level of impact that's actually reaching the streets.
So what are you kind of doing like on a the day-to-day basis? Because like I have this like broad understanding of what like lobbying firms actually do, and it's not really like good. So what does that kind of stuff kind of like actually look like? Yeah,
so most folks, when they hear, when I tell them, they're like, oh, what do you do for a living? I'm a lobbyist. They're like, and I'm like, well, like, shit, like if you actually knew what I did, like you probably wouldn't say that. But yeah, I mean, so generally speaking, the role of a lobbyist is to be the middleman or the middlewoman between your clients and the government. That could be state, federal, local. Basically, that can be anything. Whether your client wants policy change, whether your client wants to ease up regulations to make business easier for themselves, whether they want to make business, more stringent so less people can enter that market and be competition. Some folks just want introductions to government because, I mean, and as an aside, also a lot of folks, and I've seen it just because I've been in the game for almost 10 years now. Like,
Right.
I've seen it happen time and time again where you just realize, like, oh shit, like speaking to politicians and their staff is like not an easy thing. Like, I do it every day, so it comes naturally to me. But most folks just don't do that. Even folks who run Fortune 500 companies, they're not well versed in that area. So you
think it's just hard for them to like get in the door, or you think they're
yeah,
uncomfortable with
a
like
lot of them
speaking?
they either have trouble getting into the door, or they just don't really have the personality or the skills or just the understanding of how to speak to a politician, because
Right.
it's vastly different than speaking to any other human being or entity. So sometimes they want that. You name it, man. It's interesting, and it's funny, on my website, like it says like all the services that I do, like government relations, strategic communications, business advisory services, but it's like I do so much more than that, man. Like I just did on Saturday, I just ran a food distribution and voter registration drive in North Philly, partnership with When We All Vote, which is Michelle Obama's voter advocacy organization.
Awesome.
We fed about 600 people. We got a nice group of people registered to vote as well. So I do a little bit of everything, man. And I know to speak on your comment, there's a lot of like piece of shit lobbyists and lobbying firms out there like that just do evil things, like, quite frankly, but that happens all over the place and in every industry. So I can't.
Yeah, it's definitely not just exclusive to
the
the
government
system.
It's not exclusive to this business, and it also is not exclusive to every lobbying firm. Like, everybody does business differently. I know some firms and some friends of mine who only work on Republican issues, and they actually might be Republican, or only work on Republican issues and they're an independent, or only work with Democrats. Like me, I'm an independent. I've historically supported Democrats because they're not out of their minds, quite frankly. Like, a lot of Republicans are just going too far right, and I'm sure we'll get to that conversation.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, no, I like doing good work, man. That's ultimately what it is. Since I was a kid, I've always been a little bit more emotional than most, and caring about people, and really like giving a shit about people's situations, and I bring that to the work that I do.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I mean, I can relate to you a little bit on the emotional nature that I think I have, more so than probably some people. And that's kind of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast too. Like I listen to a lot of stuff all the time, and it's really hard for me to like, you can't get really good information anymore. And that's one of the things I wanted to do with this podcast is try to find, certain guests and certain people that I can bring on to at least just, kind of say stuff unfiltered, and, it not be just like brought out from whatever media organization or whatever. Cause it's like, I'm trying to like educate myself on this election, and it's like impossible to get any sort of good information. You read one article that says, this, and then the other article is all the way on the other side, and I'm trying to figure out like what the actual middle ground is. And that was kind of the purpose of, starting the show too, is to like try to make some sense of all this shit.
And the only way, that's a really good point too, is like the only way for any conversation for that matter, but definitely with politics, like the only way you can really do that and achieve that middle ground is if you speak to the practitioners, like the people that actually do the work, the people that are actually on the ground, the people whose lives are impacted by a lot of this shit. Like, that's the only way you're going to figure out, what is going on with the election is if you actually speak to people who are in politics, quite frankly. If you really understand the nuances of a lot of this stuff, if you understand the impact of certain legislation, or the impact of, legislation not being passed, or the impact of presidents or heads of state or different folks choosing not to do certain things and choosing to do other things. Like, I think it's also a good point too, is like, I think a lot of people, when they read the news, or they hear the news, or they see the news, a lot of the information that's being dispersed, whether it's truthful or not, they don't have the level of understanding or education to be able to decipher it. Like, when they say so and so is being indicted for this violation of, this act or that act. Like, most people don't know what that means. Like, when Michael Flynn got arrested, they didn't really know what it was for. They just knew he got arrested, So I think a lot of what you're looking to do now, and a lot of where folks are having severe misunderstandings, and then it ultimately creates a lot of division, is just like not speaking to the people who are actually in the work, doing the work for good, bad, or indifferent.
Yeah, I think part of it too, like what you're saying about like nuance, is the way that everything is structured now. Whether it's print journalism, internet articles, or clips on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or anything like that. Like it's all these like short little sound bites about what happened, and people are sitting next to each other. They ask them a question, then someone else asks them a question. They have 30 seconds to answer it, and then it's like, well, all right, it's a much deeper issue than that. And that was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, like with the Reform Alliance. Like, everyone, I don't know if everyone can agree, but most people can agree that like people being in jail is a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a terrible thing, and there's definitely a disproportionate number of African Americans locked up than there are white people in America, and that's like obviously it's not right. Yeah. But it's like, there's got to be a way to figure it out. But it seems like it's either like people are on one end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum, and there's got to be some sort of like solution to the issue.
It's like, and I've had a lot of time to think about this. It's like, obviously I talk about this stuff in my daily interaction. It's like,
right,
it's really the haves versus the have-nots. Like the reason a majority of minorities end up getting sent to prison all throughout the country is really because a lack of economic development, economic opportunity in their communities, right? Like, I'm not going to go rob anybody. I'm not going to go sell drugs. I'm not going to do this, that, and the third if I have opportunities here at home.
Right.
If I access the jobs, if I have access to capital, if I have the ability and the access and the opportunity to go do some real estate or start a business, I'm not going to break any laws. Why would I do that, right? So like, I think a lot of the conversation has become more about the race and more about the social aspect of this type of stuff, especially with criminal justice reform. And it needs to be more focused on what's not being done, which is direct investment into minority communities.
Yeah, that's a awesome point. And yeah, I was thinking about that too. Like when we got this this stimulus check that came out, and everyone got $1,200. It's like, all right, well, where the fuck was that money for the last 30 years in Camden, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Harlem? Like, the money's obviously there. Like, you can use it if you need to use it.
And what they did with that is like, they demonstrated that the United States has way more money than we say that we do, right? One. Two, that we're way more liquid than we say that we are, right? And three, that if we wanted to change a lot of the laws and change a lot of the situations of the communities that are, being degraded and quite frankly not receiving the opportunities that, more affluent communities are, that was proof. That was proof right there.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, I have direct deposit. Hey, $1,200 right in my bank account. I didn't believe it for the longest time that this check was going to come. I'm like, everyone's saying it was coming, and I'm like, I'll believe it when I see federal government $1,200 direct deposit into my bank account. When I got it, I was like, holy shit, they actually did it. Because I'm like, I don't even know what my political views are anymore. Like when I was a lot younger, I was I would say I was a Republican. I was a registered Republican, still am actually. And it's like the older I've gotten and the more I've gotten to learn, it's just like I kind of go to the right on a lot of stuff. I kind of go to the left on a lot of stuff. And the longer and longer that this stuff has been going on and all the events that have transpired over the past, really since March, I just like my faith in the political system as a whole just keeps dropping down. And, I don't know if you remember when I was in high school, I was in the Congressional Page program down in DC. And I
remember you were doing that.
Yeah. It was really.
You were Senate Page?
No, I was I was on the House side. So they still have the Senate Page program, but they axed the House side. But when I was there, man, like I always tell a story. I remember, I can't remember who it was, but it was two congressmen on either side of the aisle, and they were arguing about allocating money to name some post office in like Arkansas or Illinois for like an hour.
Yeah.
And I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, who gives a shit what
the biggest
the name of this
waste of taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and I'm sitting there as like a 16-year-old kid. I'm like,
yeah,
are you serious? Like, this is what we're doing here, And as we were getting closer and closer to this election, and then the coronavirus is compounding issue, then the racial issues that are going on in this country, and I just see like so I've been getting like letters in the mail from Amy Kennedy, and I've also been getting stuff from Jeff Van Drew. So Jeff Van Drew's platform is that Amy Kennedy is a fraud, spoiled, entitled person, and Kennedy's platform is Jeff Van Drew used to be a Democrat and now he's a Republican.
Yeah.
It's like
nothing about the issues of the district, nothing about how we're going to boost economic development in the district, nothing about how we need to, have a massive push to get folks registered to vote, get folks, mail-in ballots, nothing about, building up schools or, allocating more funding to schools and enrichment programs for children, nothing about anything other than, personal attacks. And it's happening way too much around the country, man. I mean, like, it's just turning into personal attack after personal attack. And like, who actually bears the brunt of all of those attacks? It's the people that live in those districts, right?
Yep. Yeah, I don't get it. I don't know if it's always been like this, because I've only been able to vote for the past 10 years or so. Right. So it might have been like this, before our time too, or maybe, part of the thing I think too is with the advent of social media and internet news and things like that maybe this has just been, growing and growing and growing.
I think that's a really good point. I think, ultimately, like, let's keep it 100. Like, this stuff's been going on for hundreds of years now.
You're right about that. Yeah, you're definitely right.
The United States has
just
been
looks different.
The United States. They've been sitting in Congress. They call it the filibuster, where you're able to speak about an issue for hours and hours at a time to kill a bill, or to divert from the truth or whatever is being said. So I think it's no different now, obviously. But social media, man, the internet, news, everything, like you said, is in the 30-second soundbite, and you're able to receive things so quickly. I mean, the fact that like they're able to disperse, about, Trump's taxes yesterday, and in the snap of a moment, the whole world finds out. It's quite frankly, it's crazy. We would have had to wait until today when they printed it in the papers.
Right.
To even find something out like that. Now we're finding out instantaneously. So it definitely muddies the waters a little bit.
Yeah. Then when you find out about it, before you'd have to, either call somebody or you go to work the next day. You say, hey, did you see this in the paper? And then, now like everything on my Facebook feed is all about, the Trump tax thing. To be honest with you, I haven't even read anything about it yet because I was like, all right, I mean, whatever. This is just some more shit.
And it's nuanced. And, the majority of people, like, does that stuff really impact their lives? Not really. And I think that goes back to the stimulus check thing. It's like the majority of Americans, like, what do the majority of Americans want on both sides of the aisle or in the middle? The majority of Americans want to know that there's opportunity out there to receive a job and to keep a job, to have money to provide for your family or for yourself, or that there's opportunity and capital out there that they can start their own business so that they can do the same. The majority of people don't care about tax returns. The majority of people don't care about what you're doing on immigration reform. Yeah. The majority of people don't care about this stuff. They just don't. I talk to people. I'm here in Philly. It's arguably one of the most diverse cities in the country. I talk to people of all spectrums of life, and they don't care. They really don't care. And even the most staunch Trump supporters and the biggest Democrats of the world, at the end of the day, when you actually talk to them as a human being, like, they don't really care about a lot of this shit. They don't.
Yeah, I mean, I know I don't. Like, I mean, there's some things like I really do like care about, but like a lot of that's like you see the stuff about the tax return. I'm like, all right, fucking whatever. Like, this isn't really like I got shit to do today. I got a podcast later. Like, I'm not really trying to go down this like rabbit hole about this, but the stuff that does really irritate me is is when we get up to these election cycles and all this, like the mail and the spam and the, you know, attacks on these people. It's like, I don't want to vote for either one of you, but I'm going to go vote anyway, you know?
Yeah.
But like,
Well, that's,
you know, what am I supposed to do?
it's a right that we have. We're able to dictate the outcome of, you know, something that ultimately does impact us, whether we like it or not. You know, the ability of a congressperson or, you know, a local elected or even the president, you know, being able to, you know, sign legislation or pass legislation or, you know, get policy change that ultimately, you know, dictates the amount of money available for people in the communities. You know, it really does have an impact on us. And I think, to me, you have the right to, you know, really impact that, even if it's in a, you know, very minuscule way through your vote. Like, why not? Like, it takes you 20 minutes.
Yeah. I always go and vote ever since, you know, I was able to. My dad, you know, when I turned 18, you know, I got my license, you know, I signed up for the draft, and, you know, I got registered to vote. Like, did that all in the same way. So what do you, do you have any sort of predictions or anything like that for this upcoming election? Like, what do you think is going to happen?
I think it's going to end in a battle.
Yeah.
And by battle, I mean a court battle. I think, you know, obviously, like, this mail-in ballot stuff, like, the average person, like, I'm even having trouble wrapping my mind around it because it's just something that's new. Like, some of these states around the country had to pass laws to even allow people to, you know, mail in their ballots to vote. So it's a new thing. It's something we never experienced before. Obviously, we have two very, you know, really the polar opposite of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who has a legislative experience for, you know, over 3 decades, you know, someone who has, you know, executive experience as a vice president, someone who, you know, has really been a player in a lot of the things that have happened in Congress over the last few decades.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, he has his skeletons, you know, that we've learned about in Joe Biden. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, we have probably the most divisive president we've ever had, or the most divisive political figure we've ever had.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that statement, 100%.
I think most people, like, get too hung up on the issues, like too hung up on, like, what he did in this area or what he did in that area and how the economy's going. And all that stuff's great. You know, you can really you know, measure his track record appropriately based on your own views. But when I say divisive, I mean, like, somebody who, in their very first press conference back in February 2017, when he got inaugurated the month before, you know, the first thing he did when he approached the podium, he said, you know, the first thing I want to do before we do anything is, you know, I want to talk about how dishonest the media is. That was the very first press conference he had as president.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not getting off to a good foot. And he hasn't stopped since. You have someone who, you know, has probably fired and hired the most, you know, employees in the White House than any other president, just because of the dichotomy in the White House between, you know, staff and different factions, as I said. You have someone who's, you know, attacking different groups, and, you know, and quite frankly, in my opinion, and honestly, you know, we can go on and on and on about Trump, but honestly speaking, you know, his level of just understanding of the job that he has and a lot of the power that he has is far below what it should be. I mean, you should know that, you know, sending a tweet has the ability to, you know, make the stock market, you know, go haywire, you know, at the snap of a moment. So I don't think that he truly understands that. And if he does, he's being very, very irresponsible with that power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I definitely don't disagree with a lot of that stuff that you said. Yeah, the one thing, you know, if you would have asked me before the coronavirus happened if he was going to win again, I think I probably would have said yes. I really think he would have. I really think he had the shot to win again. But now I'm like, I definitely don't see that happening. And the one thing that bothers me, though, is that, like, I just don't get how the Democrats put Biden up as their.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like, so, and I want to phrase it like this. Maybe this will make it seem a little different. Like, all right, think about anybody you know who is 74, 75 years or older. Yeah. Right. And just think about their, like, how they function as a person, right? Like, I have, you know, aunts and uncles and grandparents, you know, who are older, and it's like, can't we just get somebody who's a little younger and like knows what's going on? Like, I mean, just hang out with somebody who's
Listen,
over
I agree with
75
you
for a
here.
little bit and see like what they're like. Like I don't understand that part on either end of the aisle, man. Like Republican or Democrat. Like what do we like? Can we
I
move the
think, and that's a
direction?
really, really good point, man. Like, I feel like a lot of that has to do with that track record piece. Like, running for Congress is one thing, right?
Right.
Like, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez proved that you can, be highly educated. She has her degree, right? And have a level of understanding what's going on and have, the education to back that up.
And the
And
fire too, man. The fire too
right.
behind her.
I mean, and go, decide to be a server, right, in a restaurant, and then run for Congress and win. So we've proven that like you don't have to have like this ridiculous track record, right?
Right.
But the presidency still hasn't changed yet, right? So that happening on a congressional level or a Senate level or even on a local level, is it's able to happen, right? It's possible. But the presidency is a little different in that what happens often, and honestly speaking, Brian, this is really dictated by the media. You have to fit kind of that narrative. You have to be able to have the track record to speak upon. So I think, when you talk about a Joe Biden or folks that are similar to a Joe Biden, who are old and, quite frankly, white,
Yeah. Yep.
what you look at is, okay, they've spent, 30 or 40 years in politics, what could go wrong? They've been in different experiences before. They've had the ability to change people's lives for, decades now, what can go wrong. But I think to your point, there's a lot to be said about bringing in that like fresh face, that fresh attitude, kind of the energy and the momentum. And I think a lot of that not happening right now is largely because I think we're having like a push and pull between the younger generation and the old generation. The older generation is still kind of trapped into, the old way of doing things. And here we have an entirely new generation with millennials and, Gen Z and all these different generations, who really, they don't know what it's like to live life without a cell phone.
Right.
These people don't know what it's like to, live in a world without technology. So, how are we able to really build that bridge and understand each other when our upbringings are vastly different? And quite frankly, the folks who have the access to the money and have the access to the microphone and the media are the folks that have been around.
Right.
So I think, to your point, I would love to see somebody younger. I don't care, Republican, Democrat, Tea Party, Green Party, whatever.
Yeah.
I would love to see somebody younger that's able to build bridges and not not division.
Yeah. I'm tired of that. And to the thing you were just saying is like I to me that's how Trump won in 2016 was the fact that he like wasn't a politician. Like his whole platform was getting rid of the politicians, but he was probably the worst person to be the like the steward of that like movement, if you know what I mean. Like
we knew when he ran, we knew when he got elected who he was going to be, and like we constantly tried to convince ourselves that he wasn't going to be what we thought he was going to be, but every single time we had that notion, he proved us wrong. So
yeah, I know, man. I know. Like I really did. I wanted him to be good. You know what I mean? I really did because I guess I bought, whatever you want to call it. I bought into the fact that he wasn't a politician. And that's what was really, I guess that's been my biggest like hang up with any of these elections. Like, so I wanted somebody who was going to, put things in motion to start, shaking things up. And, I listened to a bunch of other podcasts and, like, it's like, on Rogan's podcast, he calls Trump like a stand-up comedian. Like he just goes up there and he's like it's performance,
man. The speechwriter, they have the teleprompter there and they just give him notes. Like they give him bullet points of the things that they want him to talk about. If he forgets something, they just write it on the teleprompter. But other than that, I mean, he's going off the top of the head. You got to give him some credit. He's going off the top of the head and people like listen to what he has to say. But I actually never told you my prediction. So here's what I think is going to happen. I think because of the emergence of mail-in ballots and kind of the confusion around voting, because of COVID, I think what's going to happen is, one and or both of the campaigns are going to end up suing in court for one, if not most of the states, and we're going to be in a legal battle. in the Supreme Court. And I think that's why the Supreme Court pick is so important, because if the Supreme Court is then held with the responsibility to decide on this case or cases, it's incumbent upon the Supreme Court to have an odd number of justices to decide on that case. So, it's a lot going on, but I think ultimately and unfortunately, I think Trump being an incumbent while these potential cases are going on, and him already for the last 2 months, saying that the election is a hoax and that the mail-in ballots are a hoax and that everything is a hoax. I think it really is setting it up for when he either loses or it's contested, him being able to say, well, I'm here and I'm not going anywhere. He already pretty much said he's not going anywhere. So I think ultimately, I think he's going to win. I think his base is stronger than we think. I think, we focus, especially the media, they focus way too much on polling. A lot of the polling in 2016 favored Hillary in most states. And we saw what happened with that. And even with, him winning the Electoral College, but, having, 3 million or so less votes in the popular vote, I mean, he still was able to garner 60 plus million votes. I think, quite frankly, I think people are happy with what he's doing with, the economy. I think people are happy with what he's done on immigration. I think people are happy with the level of racism that he's brought to the political spectrum. I think people are happy with it, and I think that a lot of those people are in hiding. I think a lot of their MAGA hats are under their beds and in their closets, and you really just don't know. So I think we're going to see that again. I hope that he doesn't win. I think Joe Biden, regardless of his age and, some of his, I guess, mental capacity being a little bit, less than it was maybe even 5 years ago. I think ultimately what he'll do, because he has that experience, is, put people in the proper place in the White House and throughout the agencies that will do a damn good job because they've done it before.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. I don't know if this is actually true, but at least my perception of things is that people getting put in these places like you're talking about aren't like that. That was the way the government was intended to be structured, and I don't know if it actually like functions like that anymore. Like everyone, will say, if the president's this person or the president's that person. Like the really important part is who's in the cabinet and who are running like all these, different committees and commissions and stuff like that. So, I mean, I hope you're right about that we get someone.
I think even within that though, like you have to have someone who has a certain level of understanding of how that process should work and how smooth that process should be in terms of hiring the right folks and bringing the proper talent pool together to bring in the right folks, and being able to demonstrate that they can do those jobs. Like one of the examples I can pull from the top of my head is the fact that, there's still many positions within federal government that Trump has yet to fulfill, just for one reason or another. And I think what that's doing is that's causing a lot of chaos, within particular agencies. Like, quite frankly, I don't know what the IRS is doing right now. Like, what are they doing about tax refunds for people? Are people going to be able to file their taxes, in a time of fashion this upcoming year? What's going on with the SBA? Like, why was that, whole loan program with the PPP and the EIDL so chaotic? What's going on with the Department of Labor? A lot of these questions that the Trump administration has been asked has been left unanswered, quite frankly. And I think what's happening is that Trump is growing into a larger figure within his office, as opposed to the agencies being able to disperse a lot of this, a lot of these policies and really able to impact people's lives down to the bottom.
Yeah. I mean, if you just like equate it to like a regular, business or whatever, you got the CEO and then you got the department managers. The department managers handle like this. Like that's like how the flow of everything should go. And I don't really. I'm just kind of jumping back into politics now, so it's like it's not. It doesn't seem like it's moving in that direction.
Yeah, it usually should be a top to bottom approach, especially within government, especially within federal government, just because you're dealing with, now they say it was 360 million people, so the level of representation is just increasing by the day. But for the Trump administration, it's been a bottom up approach. It seems like all roads lead to him, and that's really inefficient. And leads to a lot of corruption and scandal, as you see.
Yeah, yeah. I'm nervous about a bunch of things coming up. Like, I'm definitely real nervous about how the economy is gonna fare this pandemic. Like, I think a lot of businesses are gonna take a hit. Like, I had a video production company before this all started, and I was doing great. Like, I was killing it. Like I started my business. In the first year, I was on pace to make a little over 70K if everything like went well. And then right in March when everything shut down, that was it. All the work was gone. And my phone, I mean, fortunately for me, I actually, I have some skills in different areas. So I was able to get into another job, and it turned out to be a good paying job. But like a lot of people, aren't that fortunate. And I also didn't throw in a lot of money to start out. Like my investment wasn't like, I hadn't been running this business for 20 years, had all my chips in and everything like that. If it was going to happen to me, it was a good time. I guess you could say that it did happen. And then all this stuff with these like riots going on in different parts of the country, like that's got me like a little worried too, man. Like, you know, like I
I
saw this
mean,
stuff happen in Portland
they
and
hit
then in
Philly.
Wisconsin. It's like you don't know if like your neighborhood's just gonna fucking erupt.
Yeah, man. When they hit Philly after the George Floyd death, I mean, they were lighting cop cars on fire. I'm sure you saw those pictures.
Yeah, yep.
Across the street from my house, they actually like looted the store and like vandalized the streets. Literally just 3 days ago, they were marching on the streets after the Breonna Taylor decision. So, I mean, it's a lot of these issues which were once just on TV or just on your phone are now becoming front and center in communities, both affluent communities and impoverished communities, and even in middle class suburbs. And
Hmm.
people are starting to pay attention a little bit more, man.
Yeah, and I mean that's first and foremost the best part about like organization and stuff like that people get to notice stuff. But the the violence that happens with it too is just not like it's not good.
Well, I think like people generally don't know what to do with a lot of the emotions that they have just on a
Yep.
daily basis. Like not even talking about politics. Like most people don't have the emotional intelligence to be able to like store things and like understand that like not everything needs this like chaotic and like ridiculous reaction, and that there's other ways to mobilize and there's other ways to address and make an impact on something, whether you want to change it or not. And I think what people are doing now is like people are just so fed up with feeling like the people that we're ultimately paying through our taxes are they're not representing us,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not representing us because we see it day to day that like someone as wealthy as a Donald Trump only paid 750 or there's $750 in taxes. you
Mm-hmm.
know how is that representative of anything? And then that being the example that we know that there's thousands more like him who aren't paying taxes as well, but we have to every day, don't we? So I think
Mm-hmm.
people are fed up with that. People are black people and other minorities are fed up with being discriminated against and ultimately killed in some cases by the same folks who are there to protect and serve us. I think people are just fed up and they don't know what else to do. What else are there for for people to do other than to riot and loot? I'm just not sure of the answer to that question. So I don't condone it, but I certainly understand.
Yeah, and that's one thing that's I mean it's hard for me. Like I'm a white kid from the suburbs. Like it's almost impossible. I mean it's really impossible for me to really understand what that's like because I had two parents who raised me. I grew up in a really like nice, warm, loving home. I was fortunate enough to be somewhat intelligent. So like, and I went to like good schools and stuff like that. So it's like, I empathize. But it's, it's hard for me to try to wrap my head around it because it's not, it's not the background that I came from.
Yeah, yeah, no, and I feel like a lot more of your white counterparts are starting to understand that and starting to become a little bit more open minded about it. Because I think in large part, since I've been alive, like, I mean, I went to predominantly white high schools my whole life, as you know. So like,
Yep.
and even white colleges. So like, I've seen it happen time and time again with friends that I still have to this day who just don't understand any of this, don't understand the systemic issues, don't understand that like the privilege that he or she has is not the same privilege that I have. the fact that I can walk around in a suit, around the city of Philadelphia or other cities, and I get certain looks like, oh, what are you doing? Like, there's countless times I've been in, hotel lobbies having meetings with, so and so with a suit on, and like, folks will mistake me for like, one of the hotel managers or something just because I'm wearing a suit. It's like I could be doing so many other things. Like, there's gonna be so many other reasons why I'm wearing a suit. I think, in large part, folks don't understand it, and it's unfortunate to me because it's a lack of education at the end of the day. Like, you're not taking the time out to read, you're not taking the time out to try to understand, you're not taking the time out to try to have substantive conversations, with folks about their experiences and how it vastly differs from yours.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of one of my goals, through this podcast, is to try to get people from different experiences and backgrounds to deliver whatever experience they have to try to make an impact on other people, and to like also want to fuck around a little bit too. I got a couple friends that are coming on the podcast soon that I kind of want to just have a good time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think like the world is changing too, man. Like, aside from politics and this government stuff, like that's what I do during the day. But like, I really try to pay attention to like how the world is shifting, man. Like, this technology stuff is crazy. Like, I watched the other day on Twitter. I watched this like the kind of like dog robot from like Black Mirror.
Yep.
Like, this company called Boston Dynamics is like creating a bunch of robots, and like they're like really scary, like they're not doing normal things. Like, I saw another robot like do like a somersault and like land like perfectly. Like, it was just like, I'm a little bit weirded out by this. Like, we're there, like we're in the Terminator stage now.
My girlfriend is studying for a master's at Rowan right now in like computer science and machine learning and AI, and the AI stuff is really what interests her the most. And we were actually in Boston this weekend, and the car ride up and the car ride back, I was just like asking her these questions about like, hey, like, can this, what do you think about this? And it's like, yeah, we're there, and in the next few years, like, stuff is really going to start to change. And
I'm already there. I think it's interesting. Like, say what you will about the virus, and like, I definitely like, I empathize with those who like lost, folks due to COVID. But like, COVID really was a catalyst. It really has changed the way that people do business. It's changed the way people have lived their lives. It's changed the way people are approaching the future. I think people are being a lot more. I think on both spectrums, people are being a lot more conservative, with their money, with their time, with their opportunities. I think people are also being a lot more aggressive and a lot more opportunistic than they've had before. So I think it's really creating a level of positivity in that department, I think, and people just having a level of understanding that like life can change at any given moment. But I also think it's going to really make the world an interesting place, man. Like, you're already seeing a lot of countries become very nationalistic now. Like, you have Brexit that's been going on for the last couple of years. Well, now that's here, and that's being finalized. Like, you have Brazil, who's, really focused on their issues and their issues alone. I think we're going to see, like, in the next 10 years, a lot of countries become a little bit more inundated in their own shit as opposed to getting involved in other shit.
Yeah. I think so too. I don't know. I don't know if I formulated my opinion on what, if I like that or don't like that yet.
I don't know, man. I think globalization, I guess, is a really good question. Like, I think globalization is good. I think a healthy relationship and healthy interaction between the United States and other countries is good. I think, especially for the purposes of like the economy and trade, like, you want to have your products dispersed around the world. You want to have access to products that are made in other parts around the world. Right. Like, so you want to have that. But I think, to a certain extent on both sides of the spectrum, like, one, if you don't do enough of that, then you're really leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. And then that leads into, very nationalistic, and nativist immigration policies where you don't want anybody else to come in to try to take what you've already built. And then on the other end of the spectrum, too much globalization can turn into an imperialistic, campaign, which a lot of countries are accused of. So I think, there has to be a level of, like I said, healthy interaction around the world. But, when you start going into other countries and like taking over their business, their economic opportunity and their sectors, and bringing your military to their countries and taking over their communities and their villages. I think that errs on the side of extreme error.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's straight up imperialism for you, is what that is what that is.
Yeah.
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. I'm interested to see the way, this election shakes out, what happens in, our country and really I guess the world in the next 3 months, 6 months to a year.
And I just hope we don't have a civil war, man. Like it's just looking like more and more people are, like I said, people are just not, taking the energy and the feelings that they have about, either figure or either party or their own political views. And they're not taking that and doing anything positive with it. And it's not everyone, quite frankly. It's a small group of people within every state. And you have, these groups that are, setting fires to things and walking the streets with AR-15s in a protest. And, it's really polarized right now. And it's scary for me, I think, a lot more now than it's ever been, just because, like, I have a son now.
Right.
So, like, I'm constantly thinking about, security and, like, taking safety precautions because, like, God forbid, something happens to him. So, like, I think about that a lot more. Like, I get terrified, when I see, that folks are comfortable taking, and I'm a gun owner, like, I don't feel comfortable taking my gun out to a public place to brandish it or to carry it around and to show people that I have the ability to take a life. That's not cool to me. My guns are only used to protect my house and to protect, my child.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, why would I need to take them out? Like, that scares me. And it also scares me further because we're now bringing that level of protest to the political space that's already exacerbated and already divided. So it's literally like, throwing more, kerosene on a fire.
Yeah. I've kind of felt the same way. I don't have a kid or anything yet, but I moved in with my girlfriend recently, and as I'm seeing all this stuff happen, I'm like, all right, well now I have a responsibility, other than, just myself. Like, I have to watch out for her too, and I'm sure that's, it's way different than having, a kid of your own, but, still on some level, I'm like, okay, it's not just like me I'm thinking about anymore. Now I got to think about, us and our little family that we have here in our apartment. And
and people are, and I think this is the part that really just gives me, I guess, the most anxiety about it, is that people, and this is on all sides, like, people think that they're doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
You talk, like, if you listen to some of these interviews and, like, some of these people on camera, like, they really genuinely think that they're, standing up, and doing the right thing by creating, massive hysteria. And they're not.
Yeah. No, they're definitely not. And, I go, like, I don't condone, obviously, any of this creation of hysteria or anything, but I do really support, and one thing I've tried to keep in mind throughout all of this is I support, if someone's doing something within the confines of the way the law is, I support that, whether or not I agree with them or not. Like, I saw this post on Facebook the other day where these people were in Medford on Main Street, and I don't know what group they were from, but it was like a couple women who were saying, their thoughts and beliefs on what a woman's role is in society. And it's completely like ass backwards. It's like, some 18th century, type views that they had, which I don't agree with at all, but I support them being able to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, we have freedom of speech for a reason. I think this is the greatest country on earth because of the First Amendment specifically.
Yep. Yeah,
all the other
100%.
amendments are supplemental, in my opinion. Like, the fact that we're able to speak and not be, condemned and not be, arrested is an incredible right that I think we take for granted far too often. But one of the things you said is, like, the law, right? And you and I both, because we share a lot of friends. Like, I have so many friends who have more respect for the laws on the books than they have for human beings, who value the Constitution and different things that are written centuries ago more than they do their neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
That's my issue, is like, you're letting a document that was written back when they still used to, write, ink and pen, on a papyrus, if you will, right? Like, you're letting that dictate how you're treating other people or how you're thinking or empathizing about other people. And I see it on Facebook all the time. Just like I read people where it's like, well, immigrants need to go through, the right, means of becoming a citizen and this and that. I'm like, generally speaking, I agree. We have laws here, you should be able to go through the process, and you shouldn't, do it illegally, this and that and the third. But it's like, if you actually dig deep into that issue, and this is where I get into the compassion piece, like these kids and these people are coming here because there's nothing back home for them.
Right.
What would you do if you were in that position? Would you sit and just let life, pass you by and wither away, being impoverished your whole life? Or are you going to come to America where there's a ton of opportunity here?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a majority of people who are intelligent and care about their families and their livelihoods, like they're going to come here illegally. So my question is then, all right, even if we want to retroactively, put some sort of mandate on people not to come here, the people who are here, we have to deal with them with compassion. Don't separate, a child from their mother or their father. Don't, put ice out on people and bang on doors and, come to people's houses like the Gestapo to round them up. It's just like, what impact is that really having? Is it more negative than positive? I'd probably say so.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that I learned, through experience when I started working in the golf course business, and a lot of guys that I worked with were from El Salvador, Honduras, Dominican Republic, just pretty much any Central American country, Mexico included, and I learned how to speak Spanish actually from these guys too. And my Spanish is it's actually not really bad at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but like I'm talking to these guys and I'm asking them like what it was like for them in the country that they were in, and the stories I heard from them about the civil war that happened in El Salvador. And this one guy I worked with where the guerrilla fighters are storming his property, shooting his family and doing all this sort of stuff. It's that's the foundation, in my opinion. The foundation of America is opening a land for people who are in a place that's not so great to come here and succeed. And some of the guys I know, one guy I actually talked to probably about a week ago. He got here illegally. I'm pretty sure. Is now a citizen. Owns a home, and has a girlfriend, wife, whatever you want to call it. Girl he's been with for 20 something years, and it's that opportunity needs to, in my opinion, be much more easily available than it is.
Yeah, I mean, again, I use the immigration, example, as just one of many examples in which you just look at people like items or objects as opposed to human beings who have families and have daughters and sons and who have life just like we have. We all have breath flowing through our lungs. Why are we approaching political issues with such disdain and such hatred for other people when you're ultimately going through the same 24 hours that I'm going through? Whether you grew up wealthy or you grew up in a solid household and I didn't. At the end of the day, we have the same opportunities as one another in terms of being a human being, and why don't we treat each other as such?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So
yeah, and that's kind of the same problem I feel I see. I notice it the stuff that people will say on social media to each other versus what they would actually say to somebody in person. It's it kind of goes to that part with the compassion. People see oh, immigrants are bad. Illegal immigration's bad because they don't know the person, right? They didn't meet the guy that I worked with who is just trying to take care of his family and doesn't want to get run up on in his house and have people try to steal all his shit and kill him. Right. And then it's because they don't know the guy. They're just thinking of, immigrant number one, or, you can go even with people, that are incarcerated. Well, this guy committed a crime. Okay. You don't know what circumstances it was under. You don't know what the person was like. You don't know what happened. You don't actually know if he's guilty or not because, there's a chance that they didn't even commit that crime.
Yeah, and, I mean, we're in a guilty before innocent society, and also I think what really, really pisses me off is to your point, it's and when people are getting stopped by the police, and some of these men and women have been killed by the police, And it's just these nasty, just ridiculous comments that I read on social media. It's like, well, they committed a crime. Why didn't they just listen to the cops? Or, why didn't they abide by the rules? It's like the average human being, one, when they get pulled over by the police, especially minorities, you're terrified. So, all that stuff going through your mind, and, you're having heart palpitations, and you got adrenaline, anxiety. Sometimes you're not hearing, directions. Sometimes you're not going to respond appropriately, mentally and physically. And then on top of that, I think, what happens is a lot of folks are put in a position where it's fight or flight, when you get a gun pulled on you. Like, in large part, what would you do if you had a gun pulled on you? Like, I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
That's never happened to me before. I know some people personally who it's happened to. So you just don't know. And I read these comments, it's like, well, they should have done this and they should have done that. It's like, well, even if they did, does that mean they should have lost their lives?
All right.
That they should have, they now are dead, and their family has to hold a funeral for them just because they didn't abide by another human being's rule, and this human being has a badge, so now that gives them license to kill me with impunity. That's where I have a problem with this. People just don't allow these issues to get brought to a human level. It's too political. It's too political, and it's too it's just, like I said, it's not compassionate.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, man. I don't know. I hope something, something sometime soon, like really starts to change, because it's.
I think what's going to need to happen, right, is like, unfortunately, because I think, like, I'm really into the universe and like spirituality and stuff, and like duality also, and like one of the studies that I'm really diving into right now is the yin and the yang. Right? Like, there has to be bad in the good, and there has to be good in the bad. And unfortunately, I think something bad is going to need to happen in order for the large portion of society, especially American society, to truly understand. And then I think more bad things are going to need to happen in order for the majority of society to do something about that understanding. So I think, like, what I do is, like, I put responsibility on this younger generation. So, like, when I speak to like teenagers and like high school, students, and like the younger college students, like, I don't pull any punches with them. Like, I tell them, like, listen, like, if you want this type of society when you get to my age, or if you want to ever have a family, or if you ever want to do this, if you ever want to do that, like, there's a certain level of responsibility you have to take as a citizen. Like, you can't sit on the sidelines. You can't, be quiet. You can't be one way. You can't be the other. You have to really, take the feelings that you have and make them into positive, actionable items. Because if you don't, then, we're going to be looking very much like Russia, man. Vladimir Putin's been president for like 25 years. And nobody's blinking an eye.
Oh man, I hope not. I hope not. But I kind of agree with you, man. Like, I really think some more bad stuff is going to have to happen before something changes. I mean, if you look at the history of not only our country, but a lot of other countries out there, like, the good stuff comes, because there's something bad that happens, right? And that's like the catalyst for change. I feel like it's in human nature that you don't change while everything's good. You change when everything goes to shit, and then you have to change.
As an aside, if I may, I think a lot of Americans underestimate how truly evil some of the things the United States has done was. Like, we forget that we, just down the street, Rittenhouse Square, right? Just down the street, 30th Street Station, where Africans were sold to other owners. We forget that millions of Africans were placed on a boat and distributed appropriately throughout the Caribbean, throughout South America, throughout Europe, throughout America. We forget that children were stripped away from their mothers. We forget that men were whipped to death. We forget that there was Mandingo fighting, and slave owners made the more physically, superior men fight each other to the death. We forget that even before that when we got to, to the mainland America, that, we degraded and raped and pillaged, Native American villages all throughout America. We forget a lot of this stuff. And then, what happens is, and I also hate this on Facebook, what happens is folks like, well, that was forever ago. That was like, that was 500 years ago. And it's like, no, that was like 200 years ago, 100 years ago.
It's really not that long in the grand course of history either. It's not that long at all.
Not that long, especially when a lot of that trauma is still in the DNA of the ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people really, really just don't understand. I mean, quite frankly, like I can tell you, because like I said, I went to majority, predominantly white schools. Like they glossed over those topics, dude. They didn't really get into depth. They didn't really get to how gory and how ridiculous and how just purely evil some of the stuff that this country did in the name of the United States. It wasn't like they were just like these like random factions here and there, doing these things. It was in the name of the United States, that a black man is 3/5 of a man. It was ingrained into the system. And to think that, by some happenstance that something that was ingrained in the system only but 100-something years ago isn't still applicable now is just asinine to me, quite frankly. So I think a lot of this stuff, revolves around the education and lack thereof. We need to have more education about the truly vile things that this country has done and come to grips with them and come to terms with them.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And a lot of what you just said, and, I was thinking a lot about stuff that's happened, more recently in American history too, that's like where the lack of my trust in the system, comes from. I mean, there's countless, CIA coups in, Central and South American countries and Iraq and Afghanistan and other Middle Eastern countries over the past, decade and a half. And it's like, yeah, so I'm just like fucking nervous. Like I don't get how somebody else is gonna, come into office and it's like it's not gonna magically, end up being okay anymore.
Yeah, I think that's another, like people were,
like I'm trying not to have like this like big tinfoil hat on my head and just like,
yeah, I mean, because this occurs because people are too invested into the presidency, thinking that that's the only office that has an impact. Like the reason your community looks like shit is because you haven't voted in the last 3 local elections. Yeah. You don't know who your school board, commissioner is. You don't know who,
who's the county clerk
of your local town is. Yeah. You're not voting for your state representative or your state senator. Like those are the people that have more of a direct impact on your everyday life, not the president of the United States. Yep. So like to me, like what I always tell people is like, if you want to be to me, an engaged citizen and have that civic responsibility, that shit starts at home. It doesn't start with you voting for the first time in 3 years in a presidential election. We just had, midterms a couple of years ago, and we have another midterm coming up next year.
Yep. It's a lot to take in, my friend.
It's heavy stuff, man.
It is a lot.
It's out of sight, out of mind, man. Most people, they don't care about that stuff. They care about like Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion and like Tory Lanez and and sports and LeBron, and they care about that stuff. But like, where are you guys when the real substantive conversations are happening?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's that I think is another reason why I wanted to do this podcast too, is because I felt over the past whatever years, 5-10 years or whatever, that I've really detached from, my involvement in, anything political or really anything other than, making money and, what job I'm going to next or this or that. And I really want to, kind of put myself back into, the place I was before. Like when I was like, I was like 15, 16, 17, I was more well-read on all this stuff than I am now,
I think it was a lot easier then too. Like,
yeah, I didn't have to worry about paying rent or like electric bill.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm a couple years younger than you, but it's like the same generation. It's like back then, like you can actually digest the information that you're receiving because it wasn't rapid fire. Like today, like there's like, there's like 6 major breaking news stories every single day, whether it's here domestically or internationally. And like some of the stuff has the ability to impact your life. Most of it doesn't, but like the fact that it's just an abundance of information that we constantly have to take in and like reassess and like reposition ourselves. It's a lot for the average human being. It's a lot. I know it's a lot for me because I have to read this stuff for work. I need to be well versed in what's going on so that I can properly advise my clients. So like for me, it's even a challenge. I can't imagine someone who just doesn't have the ability to retain all of the information that we get on a daily basis.
Yeah, it seems like the technology has far, like, way more rapidly evolved than our ability to be able to digest it has.
For
like
sure.
in like the same
And I think
direction,
that's purposeful, right?
What do you mean? Like the technology,
Well, I think when you have too much information and it's coming from all different angles and sides, your ability to properly process and like I said, reassess and reposition yourself is it's significantly decreased than if you were able to kind of run off of this common idea or this common understanding or this whatever news story came out, like your ability to kind of like move in that direction, even for a week or 2 weeks. But now it's like you can't really make movements or decisions because it rapidly changes, or you get more information that changes your opinion about the original information that you have. It's too much. And the reason I say is by design is because when you create that level of confusion, you're able to control masses a lot more efficiently.
Yeah, that wasn't the angle I was going on, but I agree with you on that. Definitely. Yeah, I was more talking about like we haven't been able, like technology is like skyrocketed over the past 15 years. And we haven't, like our minds, like our human mind hasn't been able to catch up and evolve at an equal pace as that. But that being said, I also agree with what you're saying about it, like you can't make any decision on anything anymore, because like what you were just saying is something comes out and then 3 days later, or 20 minutes later, some new evidence comes out, or new this comes out, or new that comes out, and you're like, I don't even know what the fuck's going on anymore. So I'm just gonna shut it off. And I think that's what happened to me. Looking back on it now, I think that's why I kind of stepped away from everything. So like I can't deal with this shit anymore.
Yeah, I think to your point too, like the brain piece, right? Like they say we only access like 10% of our brains. Like I would argue to say it's probably a little bit more now, just considering like there's a technological component to it. And like I don't know how you think about like when you look at your phone, but it's a completely different world that you're going into in your mind, right? Like you're in a completely different realm, and this thing has a life of its own now. So like our ability, like you said, to like retain information and like to process it, even with the idea that we only access about 10% of it, I'm interested to see how that either grows or how that, dwindles throughout the next 5 to 10 years, with just, more emergence in technology and more information being out there.
Yeah. I mean, I can see it kind of going both ways. I mean, you ask anybody who's under, I don't know, 22 to try to tell you how to get somewhere, and they have absolutely no idea. You know what I mean? Like everyone's so
Google Maps. You have a phone, right? Like
yeah. Everyone just looks it up. But I went up to Boston and this past weekend, my girlfriend's brother got married, and she had to print out MapQuest directions for her parents because her parents aren't super tech savvy. Yeah. So, and it's like, I remember as a kid, before, I remember when MapQuest came out, and, before that, I used to sit with my dad, and we would, I was always interested in maps for whatever reason. Now we would kind of map out, where we're going. I thought it was cool, like, how all the roads were, and be like, all right, we'll go this way and then go that way. But that's like one of the things that I think anybody younger probably than me or you, like that's gone. Like sense of direction's like absolutely fucking gone.
Dude, like my dad used to take me to all my tournaments. Like MapQuest was where it was at. Like if we didn't get the MapQuest directions right, like I wasn't playing that day. I wasn't playing about it. Like we need these directions. We need these directions now. Yeah. Had it all printed out, highlighted, and starred and different stuff. That's a whole different generation, man. Like, and I think to kind of pivot to the culture piece, entertainment and stuff, I think people are just way too invested in like the technological aspect of that. Like I was saying before, like them being like way too invested in like celebrities' lives and like shit like that. Like to me,
yeah, they don't care about me, man. I don't care about them.
Yeah, like I'm just like these people don't care about my life. Like I'm not,
Yeah, it's just it's a distraction. I don't know if it's a design distraction, but it's it's just a way to sell more advertising revenue is really what all that stuff is, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, and the advertising revenue is skyrocketed these days. I mean, the fact that you're able to make $1 million off a YouTube channel is insane.
I know. Yeah, I'm trying to make like at least 2 or 3 million off this YouTube
Yeah,
channel.
yeah,
But we'll see how it
absolutely.
goes. But yeah, man, I don't know. I gotta get going because I gotta eat something and I gotta get up early for work tomorrow. But I really appreciate you doing this. I mean, I hope we start to stay in touch now. This is the first episode and it was definitely a solid one.
Cool, cool. Anytime, man. I'm always here, and definitely a good friend, man. It's good to see you. I'm glad you're doing well.
Yeah, yeah. Likewise, man. I'm super happy for you with all the stuff you're doing with your own company and just congrats on the kid too. I didn't know about that. And that's
Yeah, yeah,
it's a real
yeah.
blessing.
He's 1 year old, man. He's precious. He's smart. That's all I can really ask for. He's healthy.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful,
yeah.
beautiful.
I hope one day you could be just as blessed, man.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. I think that's coming in the next couple of years, man. It's definitely coming in
It's
the
a
next
lot.
couple of
Take
years.
your time,
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
brother. All right.